This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and after me torturing y'all with a couple of formaldehyde-infused Crosley record players, I thought you might want to see something more along the lines of a real record player. This is a Voice of Music, or VM 270 AV classroom record player from about 1967, I believe. They made these for years, but I think this is an earlier one. Even though it's an economy record player, it's still way ahead of the last two record players that we featured. And here we go. I've already cleaned this up. I still need to cut a piece of material from a case covering from a hidden spot and put it over this little boo-boo right here. Here's our packet that it contains the instruction book and all that. Originally this had one of those foam mats that likes to crumble and disintegrate. It was of course long gone, so I replaced it with a rubber mat. I have not overhauled the amplifier yet. I mostly overhauled the drive mechanism, cleaning it and lubricating it and all that. And I found something unexpected. The motor is about worn out. I noticed on the top bushing assembly someone had packed it with moly grease, and I got all that cleaned off and discovered that the shaft and bushing was very worn. It will still play a record, but it's kind of on the noisy side, and the motor needs to be replaced. Well, I contacted Gary at the VM website to see if he had a motor, and he said the type motor this used was the only one he didn't have. That's about my luck. And by the way, this uses the type of motor with a secondary winding on the field coil to provide a low voltage for the amplifier. Of course that's no big deal if we can't get that. We can just install a step-down transformer separate. But he told me I could send my old motor in to him, and he could come up with a new rotor and bushing assemblies and fit those to my existing coil, which I planned on doing. But I was digging around in my junk, and I found this Alliance motor. But this is one that uses a 90-volt coil and no transformer, secondary transformer winding. So I think I'm going to attempt to switch the rotor and bushing assemblies around and put them on my coil, and if everything works I won't have to send my motor in, and of course I'll send Gary an email letting him know that I found something. I won't just leave him hanging. Here's what all comes in the envelope. First we have a schematic diagram. That's very nice of them, and like I said, this is an older version with all germanium transistors. You're not going to get that with your new Crosley record player. In fact, I doubt there's even a schematic available from anywhere. There's probably some top secret one at the Chinese Crosley factory, but that's about as far as it goes. I'm sure there's not one available for consumer use, and I suspect that even when you send those back in for warranty repair, all they're either going to do is give you a new unit or swap whatever assembly, for example amplifier or turntable mechanism or whatever. They'll just swap one of them out of another one and put in yours and send it back. This was on the turntable spindle. Want to take a good look at that. Made in USA. Red, white, and blue target there. Here's our warranty registration card that nobody ever filled out, obviously. Here's a list of authorized service centers for VM products. Your new VM is the finest product of its kind you can buy. It is made of only the highest quality materials, and each manufacturing step was carefully checked by rigorous VM quality control. With reasonable care and proper operation, you will enjoy many hours of listening pleasure. Blah, 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 blah. And it was inspected by number 3. And then we have the instruction manual that covers the economy phonograph, the one on the right, and the next one up from it, which is a better model, of course, and I have one of those that we'll be featuring a video on one day. Now, the cartridge in here is an Static 146, which is a very popular, or it was back in the 60s and 70s, 2-volt crystal mono cartridge. The survival rate is not very good on these, but this one is still good. However, you can replace them with an 89T, which is what I usually do on these when one's bad, which is most of the time. The 89T puts out 1.3 volts. Like I said, this one puts out 2 volts, so you'll have a little bit of lack of volume, but that's no big deal. I need to order a new needle for this one from Gary, but the one in here is good enough for testing purposes. Alright, let's fire it up and see where we are right now. You won't be able to tell this on camera, but this is most definitely has some side-to-side wiggle to it, which it shouldn't have. And the camera's not picking it up, but it's definitely a little noisier than it should be. Just out of curiosity, let's see what this tone arm, what the tracking pressure is on this tone arm. 7.5 grams, which is lighter than some I've seen. Now that brings up another point that I'm going to make here real quick. Had somebody ask me on a record player that I was trying to get rid of a while back what the tracking pressure was, and I told them 5 grams, and of course I never heard from them again. Now I'd like to know what people expect the tracking pressure to be on a portable record player. If you're looking for something that tracks at 1.5 grams or less, then get a professional component turntable with a magnetic cartridge in it. You're not going to find a portable record player that tracks that low. There were a few that tracked as low as 3 grams, but 2 to 3 grams, but those are rare, especially for models with a ceramic cartridge. And people get so hung up over heavy tracking pressure. Well, I can tell you what damages records more than heavier tone arms is bad needles, bad cartridges, equipment that's not set up properly, mishandling of records, etc. As long as the cartridge and needle and tone arm is in good shape, and you run the cartridge within its recommended tracking pressure range, it's not going to chew your records up on the first or second play. No, they won't last as long as records played on a component turntable, but they will hold up longer than what people make them out to. And like I've told people, on record players like this, you probably don't want to play your pristine albums and 45s on it anyway. Reserve the more beat-up records for something like this. Here's the amplifier, a radical change from what you saw in the Crosley. This has nice, mostly American-made parts on it. Here's the pile of capacitors that came out of it. And we'll now slide it back together and give it a listen. I still need to order a needle from the VM site, but I'm not going to show you that.
Of the dolphin and picked it out for Peregrine's avid attention. There it stood, high, square, and unbecoming, the object of his grief.
And I have no 78 down here, but you can see it works. Now all I need to do to this is I want to change the needle just to be on the safe side, and I'm probably going to get a new idler wheel for this, because the old one is starting to get kind of glossy and glazed looking. Get this 45 adapter up. And then I'll cut a piece of fabric off of a hidden location to try to cover that up. Even with a 4-inch speaker, this sounds better than the Crosley, and this one's not formaldehyde infused. Well, I did come up with a 78. That off of there, because I'm sure that's in the copyright database. And I found a little piece of case covering that I could snip off from a hidden place and patch this up, just waiting on the glue to dry completely. You can tell it's been patched, obviously, but it'll look a lot better than bare wood showing there. Now all I need to do is get a new stylus, and just to be on the safe side, get a new idler wheel. The idler wheel is not something that has to be replaced right now, but like I think I've already said, the old one is kind of a little bit on the hard side and kind of glazed over, so might just better get a new one. It's got fresh rubber on it, and this thing ought to be good to go for another almost 50 years. That's the Dewdrop In by Little Richard, in case anybody asked me. And the one before that was Good Lovin' by the Clovers. Getting you to sleep after the lovin', sad when you're sad. I feel sad when you're... And that was a cut off of the brand new LP from Engelbert Humperdinck entitled Humperdinck Covers Manilow, available in record stores everywhere on 33 1/3 RPM LP, 8-track, and cassette tape. Yeah, I think that needle needs to be replaced because you can see the grooves kind of changing color as the needle traces it. Now, might say, why are you ruining a good LP like that? Well, not really. This LP is kind of scratched and messed up anyway, so we're really not hurting anything. Well, I don't think the problem is all the stylus. I think this suspension is part of the trouble. A lot of times what happens to these cartridges is the suspension will totally disintegrate and fall out. In this case, it hasn't fallen out yet, but it's very hard, very stiff, which doesn't allow the needle to move freely in the vertical direction, up and down. So we're probably just going to have to change this cartridge to something that's else that will work. Like an 89T, that's about the only thing I know of that I can come up with that has close to the same output voltage, and I can install that without having to install a separate preamp circuit. Okay, I decided to go ahead and put in a P228 cartridge just because it's cheaper to maintain even if we have to build a preamp stage. This is the old cartridge and it's definitely a replacement. It has a 1974 date code on it. And I'm not going to throw it away because it still has output. I might use it in a resurrection And I think I have such a resurrection coming, a little beat-up Sears Silvertone record player that I ordered off of one of the auction sites, mainly for the purpose of taking the motor out of it to put in this thing. But since we don't need to do that now, we can probably just resurrect that beat-up thing, and maybe I can get the money I paid for it back out of it. And on such a kiddie record player, I really don't care if it gouges records, but because what people are going to be playing on that beat-up thing probably won't amount to their good records. This one here, I'd like it to be a little more record-friendly. I don't want to see it tearing up the grooves as the stylus plays the record. Alright, good news. I'm not noticing record groove destruction like I've noticed on the first two tracks there. So this cartridge appears to be much more friendly to the record. Now all we got to do is get this a little bit louder, and we ought to be in business. Now we'll study the original amp schematic and see if there's anything I can do to get a little more gain out of this, but I'm probably just going to have to end up building an FET preamp to put in there to boost this cartridge output. And I can tell you the suspension on this cartridge is much more supple than the one that came out of here, so this one will be fine for stereo records. In fact, this is a true stereo cartridge that I have wired for mono. Okay, I've decided not to add any kind of preamp circuit to this. I was looking at the schematic, and where the cartridge comes in, the hot side, it originally went through the schematic called for a 220K. They had a 470K in here, but anyway, through a resistor and through a .006 capacitor and into your amp. Well, I lowered that 470K down to an 82K, and that gives us a little more volume. No, it's not going to be quite as loud as it was with the original cartridge in, but like I've said many times, it's not worth all the cost and expense involved for me to go building preamp circuits and doing this and doing that to put in a record player that I may not ever recover my expenses on. So it'll get loud enough for the average listener for personal use, and I think it's better to sacrifice a little bit of volume and have a cartridge that's more gentle to your records. That's plenty loud enough. I just gave the idler wheel the drill and sandpaper treatment, followed by some rubber renew, and that got rid of the slick glazed surface. So put this back together and it ought to be good to go now. Alright, there we go. Love is like a choir.